We are going to be looking at the life of Jacob in a small portion of his life, and just to give you a back history on Jacob and where we're going to pick up at. Jacob had stole birthrights. Jacob had received a blessing that was not his and kind of done some trickery, and he was not in a very good place in his life. Jacob's relationship with God, what we would say, was probably be distant because of what he was doing, because he was being deceitful and he was doing things that he shouldn't do. But how many of you have ever heard the story of Jacob's ladder? Jacob's ladder. Okay, you're going to learn about that tonight. You're going to learn about Jacob's dream at Bethel. Okay, and there's a reason why I have this rock in front of you tonight. And so whenever, really, what I had planned whenever I'd done this before, I want to give you guys a card and a pen. If you need a pen, no, you can't have that pen. That's my pen. Why did I even bring that with me?
I found my Lead the Cause pen the other day. I Lead the Cause pen.
And whenever you get this pen and you get this, if you don't need a pen, you look like you're holding pens in your hand. Whenever you get this piece of paper, what I want you to write on this piece of paper, if you want to, I'm not going to break your arm if you don't. And I had smaller index cards, but I can't find them. So these are kind of huge. And I want you to write on your index cards. Everybody need a pen? So you get to choose whether you let the person see it next to you or not. So it's up to you whether you want to spread out or not, or whether you want to stay sitting right there. But you get to write on this the most annoying person in your life. The person that drives you the craziest. Okay, I mean makes you mad. That you can't stand. Just the one that pops out in your head right now. The person you can't stand. And then the second thing I want you to write down is the situation in your life that's going on right now that you just hate the most. That you do not like. That there's something in your life that's happening, whether it be family, school, work, just whatever it is personally that you have in your life that is not going well right now, and I want you to write that on this index card. So you have a person, and if those blend together, that's fine. If you have a person that just gets under your skin, that you just cannot stand, you don't want to be around right now, and you have a situation with me, you know, if you write my name down, that's fine. I'm not taking these up and grading them, but you get to write down a person and a place that is stealing your joy, that is just killing you. Easy? Yeah, it is. So I think I'm going to move from where I'm at. How great would it be to put your Bible on top of a rock and preach off of a rock? That would be awesome. The rock is dirty. The rock is dirty because it came out of my wife's flower bed. I needed a rock, and this was my rock. Okay, so, but tonight, if I say the word rock, I want you to say the word promise.
Okay, promise.
So if I say rock, promise. Okay, so can you handle that? Okay, so we're going to be in 28, 10 through 22, which is all of from 10 to the end of the chapter. I know it's not. It's just 10 to 22. No, it's all the way to the end. And we're going to be looking at what Jacob was doing, what Jacob's seen, and what Jacob experienced during this time when he was walking away from being obedient to God and what he was supposed to be doing. So can everybody relate to that? Walking away from God in some form or fashion, not being obedient how you should be. And so we're going to look at that. When you're done writing, I'm going to start off with the verses. Everybody got your person wrote down? Everybody got your place wrote down? You don't know who your person is? No, that's fine. If you don't have one, then just the situation. If you have a situation in your life that's driving you crazy, or a place, maybe one of those people in that is what's driving you crazy. So you got it? You're good? Everybody's got something? Okay. So this is where it takes off at. In verse 10 it says, "Meanwhile Jacob left Beersheba and traveled toward Haran. At sundown he arrived at a good place to set up camp and stopped there for the night. Jacob found a stone to rest his head on. He found a rock. Oh my gosh, you're falling behind. He found a rock, okay, to rest his head against and lay down to sleep. As he slept, he dreamed of a stairway that reached from the earth up to heaven. And he saw the angels of God going up and down the stairway. At the top of the stairway stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham, and the God of your father Isaac. The ground you are lying on belongs to you. I am giving it to you and your descendants. Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. They will spread out in all directions, to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south, and all the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants. What's more, I am with you, and I will protect you wherever you go. One day I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have finished giving you everything I have promised. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I wasn't even aware of it. Let me ask you a question. How many of you feel like God was in this place before you got here tonight? If you didn't, just it's like, okay, I didn't even realize it, didn't think about it. How many of you in this building? Okay, let me ask you a question. When we have church on Sunday, when we have youth tonight, when did youth start here?
When 2 or 3 were gathered.
When people started to get here. See, a lot of people have the misconception, I'm going to church. That's one of the things that I want to quit saying, I'm going to church. I'm bringing church. Because that building, empty, it's just an empty building. There's nothing dwelling in it. See, because when you got saved, where does Jesus dwell? In your heart, inside you. When you got saved, where does he dwell? In your heart. When you got saved, your heart. You got saved, your heart. You got saved, in your heart. So, this is a building. This building burnt down tonight. Would church be over? No. Because I'd probably ask if we could rent the school on Sundays and Wednesdays, and we'd have it there until insurance built at this big, beautiful facility. Okay? But that's the deal. We have to start thinking about where God dwells, because we get hung up on, I'm going to church, that we can't experience God till we get there. There's a lot of people on Sundays that just show up on Sunday because that's where they go to experience God. That's the problem. They need to realize they are bringing God to the church. Make sense? Okay. So, it says, but he was also afraid and said, what an awesome place this is. It is none other than the house of God, the very gateway to heaven. The next morning, Jacob got up very early. He took the stone, he took the rock, okay, he had rested his head against, and he set it upright as a memorial pillar. Then he poured olive oil over it. He named the place Bethel, which means house of God, although it was previously called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, if God will indeed be with me and protect me in this journey, and he will provide me with food and clothing, and if I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will certainly be my God. And this memorial pillar I have set up will become a place for worshiping God, and I will present to God a tenth of everything he gives me. So, where did God show up in this? You have a guy who has done some things he shouldn't have done. If you go back and back search this, you'll see him do some things he shouldn't have done. But where does he see God show up? Where in this does God say, this is me? Not when he was awake, not whenever he was doing his deal, but he had to wait, because sometimes, how many of you feel like God can't talk to you until you shut up? Because God never really shows up when he's awake and says anything to him. He shows up when he's sleeping. He shows up when his head is on something that it's not intended for. Because if I ask you to take this rock home tonight and put it on your bed and put your head on it, throw your pillow. How many of you have like umpteen pillows on your bed? Oh my gosh. Do you have, what do they call those pillows? Throw pillows.
I have like 8 of those.
What do you do with them?
It matches my comfort.
Oh, I use them all.
We have two. One that my wife sleeps on, one that I sleep on. She's not one of those ladies that has to take 8 pillows off the bed so I can sleep on the 2 that were buried underneath them. Does that make sense? Okay. Because why do you have those pillows on there for? They are pretty. But nobody better lay their head on them because they're not used for you to sleep on, right? Because they're pretty. But they're not intended for you to sleep on. So are they being used what they're actually designed for? Not really. Because you have to say, where does God show up? God shows up. Meanwhile, Jacob left Beersheba and traveled toward Haran. At sundown, he arrived at a good place. So he arrived at a good place. How many of you love it when God just shows up at any place you're at, no matter what it looks like? Even when you're on the run from him, he finds a good place. Shows up at a good place to set camp and stop there for the night. Jacob found a stone, a rock, to rest his head against and lay down to sleep. As he slept, he dreamed of a stairway to reach from the earth up to heaven, and he saw the angels of God going up and down the stairway. Did God ever show up and speak to him in an audible voice? Did he ever speak to him when he was awake and say, this is where I'm at, this is what's going on? It was a dream. Have you ever had a dream that's so real that it just seemed like it's going to happen tomorrow? Have you ever had a dream and what you dreamed, something happened that was along the lines of what you dreamed, and you're like, oh gosh, I'm clairvoyant. Okay, I must be super spiritual or whatever because I just had a vision and it happened. Yeah. Have you ever feel like God has spoke to you in a dream? How does it make you feel? Because do we limit the way God speaks to us sometimes? Do we limit the way God shows up? We do whenever we say the terms, I'm going to church today. But really, you're the one bringing church to the building. We can't have church if you don't show up. Can't have church if my wife shows up to sing praise and worship music and there's nobody sitting out there in the auditorium. Is there anybody to have church with? No. If it was just her, preacher didn't show up, nobody, just her and a guitar stand up there on stage. She could have some kind of deal between her and God there, but is church happening? Because nobody shows up. It's not the building. He shows up to this place. I mean, really, because you see him put his head against a rock to go to sleep. Was God in the rock? No, he's not. But he could be, if he wanted to be, right? God could be in anything he wanted to be if you had it. Because a lot of times we wait to experience God till we get here. There's a lot of people that will wait to experience God until they get to some churchy event. Or they'll wait to experience God till something bad happens in their life. They'll wait to experience God till stuff not right at home to where they got to start praying. Does that make sense? We don't experience God enough. And I would love for you in 2020 to start experiencing God more than you did the past year. Because how many of you set some kind of resolutions? I do not. Because here's the deal. That creepy boy that was looking at your swimsuit photos on Facebook is still doing it in 2020 that was doing it in 2019. A lot of you right now are going to go home and check your friends list and see who's checking your stuff out. Okay? No, I didn't. But that's just the deal. People make resolutions and they try to stay, 2020 is a starting point of some sort for them. They will wait till then. But guess what? The same problems that were in 2019 are still present with you in 2020. We just feel like we need a starting point. Lots of ladies started a diet today.
Can I give a comment, please? I told myself I was going to start an ab workout again.
Lots of guys stop chewing, stop smoking, stop cursing, stop whatever it is that they think they might need to stop. I mean, what would be a resolution that you would make, that you would think in maybe your thoughts of something you want to make a resolution not to do again? God show up in this, or was Jacob working through some things on his own? Because did God really just show up and start talking to him? Or was Jacob really working through some things that was going on in his life? Because Jacob is kind of on the run a little bit from some things that he did. And if he's sleeping with his head against a rock,
Promise.
Is that what he's supposed to be doing? Is this intended for you to sleep on? Okay, would you want me to send this home with you tonight to sleep on? You wouldn't want it. You wouldn't want to put this on your bed, and you wouldn't want to lay down on this thing at night. Okay, you can say, "Oh, I would do it," but trust me, about 10 minutes into it, you're going to be wishing you had your comfy little pillow back. I'd be wishing that I had my pillow back. Okay, this was being used what it was not intended for, because he was in a place that he was not intended to be in his life. But in this spot, did he find God? Was God in the rock? Okay. We're going to see what God can do through you. Through you. Do you think God can do something through you? Okay, you better. Okay. So, at the top of the stairway stood the Lord. Who's at the top? The Lord. Okay. Then, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham and the God of your father Isaac. The ground you are lying on belongs to you. I am giving it to you and your descendants. Okay. So he's getting something. How would you love it if God showed up and said, I'm going to give you all this? You stood out on your back porch and all the land you could see, God said, I'm going to give that to you. Everything in it is yours and it's going to be for you.
Yes, please.
Because from my house, I can see Bentonville and Rogers and Pea Ridge and Garfield and Sligman. I can see all that. If God said, I'm going to give that all to you, I kind of get a little overwhelmed, for one, because then I'd be responsible for all those people. Because see, that's one of the things that we're not realizing, that when God gives you something, there's a responsibility on top of it. Because this time, Jacob's just laying with his head on a rock asleep. He's dreaming. God shows up, starts speaking to him in this dream. He doesn't show up when he's awake. He doesn't show up in some physical form in front of him. It's a speaking through him, through his thoughts and through his dreams. And he says, I'm going to give this all to you, and this is all going to be yours. Do you think he really grasped the responsibility of what God was telling him right at that point? God starts saying, I'm going to give you all this stuff. Do you realize the responsibility that goes along with it? When you walk into that situation that you wrote down on your card, do you realize that's a responsibility that God has given you? Because it's not where you want to be. It's going, just like Jacob was sleeping on this rock, because it was not what it was intended for, but it was a place that he laid his head. Is it hard? It's a hard place to be. It's not comfy. It's not warm and fuzzy like your pillow. It's hard. It's not what you want to be putting your head on day in and day out. But your situation that you're in right now is what your head is on day in and day out. But God is trying to give you a promise while your head is on top of this thing that is so hard. And you need to go to school Monday, you need to go to work Monday, or whatever it is that you wrote down on your card, and realize this is not where I'm intended to be, but this is where God is trying to speak to me. Because was God speaking to Jacob while he was on top of this rock? While he's laying his head on this rock, was he speaking to him? If you went to school Monday and that person that drives you the most craziest, and if you looked at them and said, that's my responsibility, that's my person, because he even says this is the gateway to God. If you looked at them and said, that's my connection with God right there, that person that makes me the craziest, that situation that I wrote down in my life right now that sucks the most, if I realized that's where God was trying to speak to me, how much more would you be okay with being in that spot? My 2019 sucked. It was so many changes I would love to make. Because for me, experiencing my mother passing away is hard. But I had a choice. Do I see God in this? Or do I just see it as something that's hurting my head right now? That's just uncomfortable, that I don't want to be in. But I had a choice to either look at it as something hard and difficult and a situation I'm not supposed to be in, or I took the chance to see God do something great. Because the death of my mother changed a message on a Thursday night at Camp Siloam. Because I had a conversation with the pastor that was preaching there. And he just comes up and strikes a conversation with me and he says, "Hey, how's your week been?" You ever ask that person how your week's been and their week's been horrible and they tell you about it and you're like, "Gosh, but I got to tell him about it. I got to tell him about my mom saying, 'You're going to camp. I don't care if I die while you're at camp. I don't care if I die while you lead the cause. You're going to go to camp because there's not going to be a kid not hear the gospel of Jesus Christ because I had cancer.'" That guy's message that night was to be on prayer. He got up there that night, and if you remember it or not, he said, "You know what? I had a conversation today, and my message has changed. We're going to preach about the gospel tonight. I'm going to give you the gospel of Jesus Christ." So me and him that night after that message hung out in the cafeteria up there, and he said, "You know, you changed my message." I said, "I didn't change it. God did. That's it. Period." I had a choice. And through that hard situation, I've looked at it, I've examined it, and I've seen how God showed up and did things in that. There was a message preached to however many hundred kids that were there, got changed to the gospel versus prayer, which there's nothing wrong with preaching about prayer, but the gospel of Jesus Christ got preached because I chose to see something better in a situation that was hard. Does that make sense? Okay? So, you can see what God can do through you, and He's going to give you all kinds of responsibility. Because He does that. He says, "Your descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth." How would you like to think about your responsibility being as numerous as the dust out there right now on that road? You can't count it. You are that dust He's talking about. Do you realize that? That's you. You are a descendant. You're the dust. You're a descendant of Abraham. You're a descendant of Adam. We lose sight of that so much that we are, when Abraham was told all these stars, it's going to be more people in his lineage than there is in the stars up there. You're from that. And that's not. You are from the responsibility that God is talking about when He's talking about the dust. So you have a responsibility. He says, "You're going to be as numerous as the dust of the earth. They will spread out in all directions, to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south, and all the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your descendants." So, I got a rock. Do you feel like you have one? Because you have a hard situation right now. You wrote something down. You have some person who is driving you crazy. Can you find the promise of God in that situation somewhere? Can you find the promise of God through that person who is driving you nuts? Because how better is it going to be when you show up in that situation, whether it be something at home or be a person you're dealing with, and you show up and you go, "You know what? I see God's promise in that person. That person that's making me the angriest, that situation that is hurting me the most, has to have the gospel of Jesus Christ in it. As mad as they're making me, I can't wait to see how God speaks to me through this person who is driving me nuts, through this situation that is every bit as hard as that rock. How much will it change your mindset if you look at these people in that area of your life as something how God is trying to speak to you about a promise that He has for you? Will it change your mind? It's still hard, right? Because the situation is still hard. This isn't as soft as my pillow. If your situation or the person you're dealing with was as soft as my pillow, how easy would it be? Yeah, remember when I shot the arrow into the wall and it just bounced right back real hard? And it's because it hit something that was hard. But it came back where? It came back to me. God's promise will come right back to me. More in the hard stuff. I'll see God's promise more in the hard things in my life than I do in the soft things. Because when I shot that rag with that arrow, what happened to it? It just dropped. Because it was soft, it was easy, it's cushy. There's nothing hard about it. It was easy. My 2019, in man's eyes, was terrible. But through all the stuff I've experienced, my own surgeries, my wife's cancer appointments, my mom's death, I grew closer to God than I ever have. I've seen him do things more through those situations than when I just had a good day. Does it make sense? Isn't it crazy that we have to have horrible days to be able to see God show up? It just doesn't make sense to me. Why I wait till then. Why I can't experience God till I get to church. Why I wait till I get here to experience God. There's going to be chairs filled with people Sunday that's what they're doing. They are waiting till they sit down in that chair and a music group sings to them and a preacher preaches to them, which will be me this Sunday. That's when they start to experience God. And then when they leave, guess where God stays for them? Here. Jacob had the choice to get up off of this rock and leave his promise sitting there, or take it with him. What's more, I am with you, I will protect you wherever you go. This is God speaking to him about his promise. Okay? Does it mean he's not going to ever die? Does it mean he's not ever going to stub his toe? Or does it mean that he's going to take care of him spiritually? He's going to take care of him, provide for his needs. One day I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you. Isn't it great that God never leaves you no matter whatever is I almost said the goodest. Oh my goodness. The best situation in your life or the hardest. God never leaves you. You have the choice to whether you see him or not. I will not leave you until I have finished giving you everything I have promised you. Do you know what is the end of God's promise for you? Eternal life. When I die, God's promise comes full circle. When I told people about my mom passing away, I told them it was God's promise for her coming full circle. Because where is she at now? She's in heaven. We were talking last week about Lazarus and things like that, bringing people back. And I said, there's no way in the world I'd bring my mom back. No way. Why would I rob her of where she's at right now just so I can be comfy cozy in my pillow? I'm okay with it. I don't like it. I wish she would have been here for Christmas. I wish she would have been here for Thanksgiving, my birthday. But I would not bring her back. I would not break God's promise to her just so I could be happy. No way. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I wasn't even aware of it. Surely the Lord was in this place, and I wasn't aware of it. It was not where he was supposed to be. And the situation was not what it was supposed to be. But he found God in it. How often are we like Jacob when we don't recognize God is there? How often am I moving around doing things during the day and I forget that God is there? That I feel like he's not there until I pray. I feel like he's not there till I read my Bible. I feel like he's not there till I'm studying for a message. I feel like he's not there till I'm here. But in reality, he's there the whole time. Was God living in this with him? Or was it just a situation where he realized God was in control? Yeah, he realized it. It says, but he was also afraid and said, what an awesome place this is. God, the very gateway to heaven. He found a gateway to heaven where he was at. Can you find a gateway to heaven in what you wrote down on that card? And that's going to take some thinking for you. That's going to take some searching for you to find yourself in that spot to go, okay, I can see God in this. I can see an avenue of how God is working in my life through these poopy people that I'm having to deal with, through these poopy people that I have to stare at every day, through these poopy people that I have to listen to every day because they make me want to choke their little necks. You got them? I got them. When I first started studying this week, I started seeing situations in my life going, okay, I need to be more focused on how God is in this than how angry these people are making me. It says the next morning Jacob got up early. He took the stone he had, rested his head against, and he set it upright as a memorial pillar. Then he poured olive oil over it. He named it the place of Bethel, which means the house of God, although it was previously called Luz. Then Jacob made this vow. If God will indeed be with me and protect me on this journey, and if he will provide me with food and clothing, and if I return safely to my father's home, then the Lord will certainly be my God, and this memorial pillar I have set up will become a place of worshiping God, and I will present to God a tenth of everything He gives me. There's even a message in tithing in there. All these things, if God brings me through all this stuff and brings me back home to the people I have rejected, the people I've turned my back on, which is a Father, then I'll know that God is surely my God. You're young. You haven't been through a whole lot yet, but a lot of you have seen some things that you shouldn't have seen. A lot of you have seen some things that you shouldn't have been through. Have you seen God's promise show up before? That's what Jacob is saying. If God's promise will hold me through all this, then He will be my God. Does any of you have an excuse right now to say God has not met any promise in your life? I have salvation. That's the most major promise that I have in my life right now. If I fall over dead tonight, His promise comes full circle for me. I've seen God do so much miraculous stuff in my life. I have this when doctors said we wouldn't. I have told you countless times Joe was supposed to be Down syndrome. He's not. I've seen God's promise show up so many times and take care of me because I could have flew right over that and just said, well, man did that. Man did this. Man did that. Did man build this building? Yes, he did. Carpenters came in with wood and nails and everything else and put this building together. Did carpenters build that building over there? Yes, they did. Does God dwell in that building? Not until you allow Him to. We could show up here tonight and just stare at each other. Are we having church? We're just staring at each other. We could show up here tonight because you get to choose how you show up. You are preparing how you're going to show up for youth when you get out of bed that morning. Because you start deciding, what's my heart going to be like when I get there? What's my mind going to be like when I get there? When you got on the church van tonight, is it easy to lose your joy on a church van? It's very easy. Is it easy to lose your joy at home? Yeah, it is. You get to choose whether God shows up in this building. Was God living in the rock Jacob was leaning on? But He could. Could He live in your pillow that you're going to lay your head down on tonight? He could. Can He live in what you wrote down on those cards? He could. If you choose to see Him. If you choose to let Him be there and show you what He's trying to do. I don't know how long you're going to be in it, because there's nothing that says, because this is what Jacob's talking about. If He leads me through all this stuff, did He say how long it was going to be till all those promises came fulfilled? God never said that. He just said, this is what I'm going to do with you. God has said what He's going to do with you. You just have to read it. If you'll notice on here, when it talks about the angels and the ladder, I'll even go back so you can see it. At the top of the stairwell, we'll go further back. As he slept, he dreamed of a stairway that reached from the earth up to heaven, and he saw the angels going, which way? Up and down. Which way were they coming from? He was coming from here, going up. Is that the opposite of how we think God works? Because usually we think it's God coming down to us. But God is waiting for you to do something here so He can come down. I'm fixing to be a part of what they call the Roaring 20s fast that's coming up on January the 5th. 21 days fasting. And it's to show God how serious we are about how we want Him to move in young people today. We're trying to get millions of people on board with it. I'm one of the people that are in charge of the state of Missouri. There's me and 3 others. My friend Malachi O'Brien is the guy that's headed this all up. Have you ever heard of Passion that's going on right now? Yeah. It's huge. You know what it started off of? A 21-day fast. A group of people just got together and fasted to see God take a movement and make it serious. And right now, I don't know how many thousands of teenagers, they're college students and up, are a part of such a beautiful movement. All because something started here. It's like your prayer life. God is waiting to come down if you will be serious about it. Because the angels were going up. It was the opposite of how we think this should be working, that the angels were coming down and going up. But no, they were starting at the bottom, where the rock was, where the promise was at. Something real familiar about this I want you to realize. It's in Luke 24 and says, "Now there was a good and righteous man named Joseph. He was a member of the Jews in the high council, but he was not agreed with the decision and the actions of the religious leaders. He was from the town of the Amorites in Judea, and he was waiting on the kingdom of God to come. He went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' cross and wrapped it in a long sheet of linen cloth and laid it in a new tomb that had been carved out of rock." Something else was laid on what it was not intended to be on. Jesus' body was laid on a rock so you could have a promise. That's where the promise comes full circle for you. Jesus' body was laid in that tomb on a rock so you could have a promise. You have a rock, you have a promise. You get to show up tomorrow, maybe even as soon as you leave here. Your rock is in your face. But what do you have to remember? The promise that was given to you. He will show up when you're somewhere you're not intended to be and give you his promise. He did that with Jacob. He showed up in a place he was not intended to be, and he gave him a promise. So you get to choose tonight, when you leave here and you see what is going on that is no bueno, it's no good, can you find God's promise in it? It's your choice. You can either continue to live in it as hard as it is, or you can see God's promise in that person. But you got to remind yourself, when they're making you want to squish their little head, God's promise is in that somewhere. And I'm not going to let the devil get the best of this situation. God's promise is in whatever is going on so tough in my house that I can't stand it. God's promise is going on in that classroom at school that I just can't get. God's promise is going on with the anxiety that's in my life. God's promise is going on with, I want this, but I can't have that. God's promise is going on. You just have to be able to see it. Can you do that? Is it going to be easy? Nope. It takes work. Y'all look like you're ready to go home and go to bed. That makes sense? You get it? You have a rock, but you have a promise. Okay. Does anybody want to close?